Way up high, above the Bosphorus, on one of Istanbul's very highest points, there's this profound mystery. It's a spot with absolutely breathtaking views, yeah, but also this deep spiritual meaning. And a tomb that just seems to defy all logic. So let's get into the story behind it.
Okay, so here's the big question, the real puzzle we're trying to solve. At the very top of this hill, there's a grave. And get this, it measures an incredible 17 meters. That's over 55 feet long. So who on earth is buried here? And why in the world is their tomb so long? Well, the answer begins with someone who's a huge deal across centuries and, multiple faiths. The person people believe is resting right here is none other than the Prophet Joshua. So who exactly was Prophet Joshua? Well, in religious tradition, he was the incredibly loyal apprentice and the hand-picked successor to a name you probably know, the Prophet Moses. He was basically destined to take over and carry on a mission that was just monumental. It was going to shape the entire fate of his people.
And what's so amazing is that his importance is pretty much universal. In Islam, he's known as Yusha bin Nun. In Judaism and Christianity, he's Joshua, or Yeshu. He's this key figure, a really pivotal leader, recognized across all three of these major Abrahamic faiths.
So how does someone even prepare for a job that big? Well, his path to leadership was shaped by this incredible, almost otherworldly experience. See, according to Islamic tradition, Joshua was the young guy who went with Moses on a journey to meet this mystical figure named Khadir. And this wasn't just some casual trip, It was a deep spiritual education. He was witnessing divine wisdom up close, and that's what really prepared him for the massive task that was waiting for him.
And that brings us to his sacred mission. This was huge. Joshua was basically called on to finish a job, a destiny, really, that even his famous mentor, Moses, couldn't complete himself.
And what was that goal? Oh, just to lead the Israelites into the promised Holy Land. Talk about pressure. This was a task that had been put on hold for a whole generation. They'd been wandering in the desert for 40 years. They were basically waiting for a new, more faithful generation to come along. And Joshua, he was chosen to be their leader. So after Moses passed away, Joshua stepped up and took command. And he wasn't just a spiritual leader, not by a long shot. He turned out to be this brilliant military strategist. He's the one who led the charge into the Promised Lands, and he's famously credited with orchestrating that legendary victory at Jericho.
Okay, wait a minute. How did this ancient prophet, who was leading people in the Holy Land, end up being connected to a random hill in Istanbul, hundreds of miles away, right? Well, the story of how that connection was made is this really fascinating tale of faith and, well, a little bit of mysticism. Yeah, this link was made way back in the Ottoman era by a mystic named Yahya Effendi. And here's the really interesting part. According to the story, he didn't find it by digging around or doing research. He discovered the spot through a spiritual vision, a dream, that told him this exact hill was the final resting place of the prophet Joshua.
And this brings us right back around to the craziest thing about this whole place, that unbelievable 17-meter-long tomb. That's physically impossible for a person, right? So what's going on? Well, the answer actually has nothing to do with physical size. Here's the key thing to understand. The length is symbolic. It's not meant to be literal at all. You see, in Islamic tradition, these super long tombs are used to honor really important figures for a couple of reasons. First, it's a way to represent their huge spiritual stature, like how big they were in spirit. And second, it can also be a marker for a sacred area when nobody knows the exact spot where the person is buried. It's kind of like a way of making the whole area holy. But this hill is so much more than just a historical monument. It's like a living, breathing sanctuary that draws tons and tons of visitors every single year. So what is it? What pulls all these people here? Seriously, what is the big appeal of this place? Why does it endure? Is it the history? Is it about faith? Or is it something else? Turns out the reasons are just as different as the people who come here. When you look at why people visit, it's really a mix of things. For a lot of them, it's about seeking a deep spiritual connection. For others, it's more about finding some psychological comfort, a bit of hope. It's also just a really strong cultural tradition for many families. And hey, let's be honest, the views are incredible, so it's a tourist spot too. But really, when you get down to it, a visit to Joshua's Hill is often just a search for hope. People come here to pray for strength before a huge exam, or for healing when they're sick, or maybe just for a little guidance when they're at a crossroads in life. It's a place that holds a lot of personal meaning for a lot of people.
Okay, and from a theological point of view, this is really important to get. In Islam, all prayer is directed only to God, period. A place like this is what's called a vasil, which means it's like a special occasion or a means for prayer. The idea is that it's a place where, by remembering a great prophet, you might feel a little bit closer to the divine, and maybe your prayers feel more focused, more heartfelt.
So in the end, Joshua's Hill is this amazing crossroads. It's the spot where history, faith, and culture all come together, and they meet that timeless human search we all have for peace, for hope, and for a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
And all of this really leaves us with one last thing to think about. Where does the holiness of a place like this really come from? Is it from its ancient history, which we can't really prove? Or does it come from the centuries of faith and devotion and all the hope that millions and millions of people have brought right to this spot and are still bringing here to this very day?